Welcome to Night Creepypasta Rules. Tonight we descend into something dark. Not just shadows under your bed or whispers behind your door. No, tonight's story clings to your spine and lingers in your thoughts long after the screen fades to black. If you've ever broken a rule you didn't understand and survived to regret it, this story is for you. Before we begin, leave a comment below. Have you ever felt like something was watching you, even when you were alone? Let me know. I read them all. And if you're new here, subscribe. I only tell stories that bite. Now, dim the lights, put in your headphones, and whatever you do, watch to the end. There's a twist waiting, and it's watching you. The Appalachian darkness doesn't just fall. It seeps up from the ancient earth, thick and cold, smelling of damp soil and secrets older than the mountains themselves. It was a tangible presence as I guided my sputtering sedan, a relic from a life I was trying to outrun, off the cracked asphalt of Route 33 and onto the gravel driveway of Nomad's Rest. The sign, a faded painting of a lone wanderer against a mountain silhouette, creaked a mournful welcome in the biting late autumn wind. This was it, my new sanctuary. Or perhaps my new purgatory. My name is Elias Vance. For 15 years, my camera had been an extension of my eye, capturing the grim tableaus of urban decay and human tragedy for police archives and occasionally the lurid curiosity of the press. But in one case, the unsolved disappearance of a little girl named Lily Chen, her small red shoe, the only thing left behind in a muddy alley, had fractured something within me. The image of that shoe, a tiny beacon of lost innocence, replayed in my mind's eye. A constant, silent accusation that I'd missed something, some vital, overlooked detail in the hundreds of frames I'd shot. The city, with its cacophony and relentless reminders, had become unbearable. So I ran to the quiet, or so I hoped, of Western Virginia. The man who owned Nomad's Rest, Jedediah Jed Thorne, was waiting on the porch of the small clapboard building that served as both a convenience store and his living quarters. He was a silhouette against the weak yellow light spilling from the doorway, tall and gaunt, the wind whipping his thin gray hair. As I approached, his features resolved into a road map of deep lines, eyes like chips of winter ice set deep beneath a heavy brow. He looked as old and weathered as the mountains that loomed behind the station. "Mr. Vance, I reckon," he said, his voice a low rumble, like stones shifting in a riverbed. There was no handshake, just a slow nod. Car sounds like it's seen better days. Much like most folks who find their way out here. He led me inside. The store was a jumble of dusty shelves stocked with necessities, and the kind of tourist trinkets that looked like they'd been there since the Nixon administration. The air was thick with the smell of old coffee, pine cleaner, and something else. A faint, almost imperceptible sweetness, like overripe fruit on the verge of decay. "Shift starts at 10, ends at 6, Jed stated, his gaze sweeping over me, lingering for a moment on the camera bag I still carried by habit. "Just keep the coffee brewing, the pumps running, and the till honest. Most nights you'll see more deer than people." A young woman emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on a faded apron. She couldn't have been much older than 20, with bright, curious eyes and a cascade of auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She offered a small, friendly smile. "This here's Sarah Beth Riley," Jed said, a hint of something almost like affection in his rough voice. "SB, this is Elias Vance, the new Nightman." "Folks just call me SB," she said, her voice a pleasant contrast to Jed's gravel. "Welcome to Nomad's Rest. Hope you like quiet. Gets real quiet out here." She glanced out the window into the encroaching darkness, and for a second, her smile faltered. Real quiet. She was finishing her shift, tidying up, and gave me a few pointers about where things were. Her chatter a brief welcome warmth in the otherwise somber atmosphere. After SB had driven off, her taillights quickly swallowed by the night, Jed turned to me, the folksy demeanor he'd shown with her vanishing. His eyes seemed to darken. "Now about the rules, Mr. Vance," he said, his voice dropping. "These ain't company policy. These are local customs, you could say. For your own good." I waited, a familiar prickle of unease starting at the base of my neck. The same feeling I'd get arriving at a scene before the full horror had been uncovered. First, Jed held up a gnarled finger. "If a customer buys exactly 6.66 gallons of gas, and it'll happen, mind you don't say a word to. And not a greeting, not a thank you, nothing. Just take their money and let him go." My brows furrowed. "That's specific." Jed's expression didn't change. "Second, if a customer pays you in coins that look older than this here station, older than me even, you don't touch him with your bare hands. Use the tongs under the counter. Put them in the designated jar. Don't let any mix with the regular change." He gestured towards a heavy, lead-lined tobacco humidor behind the counter, secured with a thick, rusty-looking padlock. It seemed an odd place for spare change. "And third," his voice was barely a whisper now, and the wind outside seemed to keen in agreement. "If you see footprints appearing out there in the snow, or the mud after a rain, and there ain't nobody there making, you get yourself inside. Lock the door. Don't look out again till you're sure whatever it was has passed on by." A chill, colder than the mountain air, snaked down my spine. This was beyond eccentric. This was something else. "Mr. Thorne," I began, trying to keep my voice even. "What exactly am I supposed to be dealing with here? Are we talking about local troublemakers? Pranksters?" Jedediah Thorne looked out the grimy window, past the anemic glow of the gas pump lights, into the vast, swallowing blackness of the Appalachian night. His sigh was heavy, laden with a weariness that seemed to go bone deep. "Some things round here, Mr. Vance," he said, turning back, his eyes like dark pools reflecting no light. "They just are. Been here longer than the roads, longer than the towns. Best not to poke the quiet. Best just to follow the rules." He handed me a set of keys. "Store's yours till sunup. Try not to learn the hard way why those rules exist." He retreated into his attached quarters, the door clicking shut with a sound of finality. I was alone. The hum of the ancient coolers and the incessant, whispering wind my only companions. The scent of decay, I now realized, was stronger. I walked to the window, peering out. The darkness was absolute, a living entity that seemed to press against the glass. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of movement at the edge of the woods, where the gravel met the tree line, but it was gone before my photographer's eye could truly register it. Just the wind, I told myself. Just the shadows. But as I turned to start my first long Appalachian night, the weight of Jedediah's decree settled upon me, heavy and cold as a burial shroud. The first few nights at Nomad's Rest were an exercise in forced normalcy. I'd meticulously clean already spotless counters, rearrange dusty cans of motor oil into perfectly aligned rows, and brew pot after pot of coffee that mostly went untouched. The quiet SB had warned me about was an oppressive blanket, broken only by the hum of the coolers, the tick of an old wall clock, and the ceaseless, sibilant whisper of the wind through the pines. It was a quiet that allowed the ghosts of my past ample room to roam. Lily Chen's small red shoe would flash in my peripheral vision, the imagined click of my camera shutter a counterpoint to the station's mundane sounds. I tried to rationalize Jedediah's rules. The 6.66 gallons? Probably some local superstition. A number to ward off bad luck, or attract it depending on your leanings. The old coins. Maybe Jed was a closet numismatist. Or perhaps there was a history of counterfeit currency in these remote parts. The footprints. Animals. Surely. Or the wind playing tricks with the snow or dust. But the conviction in Jed's voice, the deep-seated weariness in his eyes, gnawed at my attempts at logic. It was near the end of my first week, a night when the moon was a sliver of bone in an inky sky, that the first rule was tested. Headlights, one dim and flickering, the other entirely dead, crawled into the station's forecourt. A battered pickup truck, its engine sputtering like a dying man's last cough, shuddered to a halt by pump number 2. I watched from behind the counter, a knot tightening in my stomach. The driver's side door creaked open and a figure emerged, little more than a silhouette in the gloom. They moved with a slow, deliberate gait, almost a shuffle towards the pump. I couldn't make out a face, just a dark shape beneath a wide-brimmed hat. My hand hovered over the intercom button, ready to offer assistance, but Jed's warning echoed in my ears. The numbers on the digital display of the pump climbed. 3.45, 4.87, 5.9. Then with a final soft click, it stopped. 6.66, my breath hitched. The figure at the pump didn't move for a long moment, then slowly turned their head towards the store, towards me. I couldn't see their eyes, but I felt the gaze, cold and intensely focused, like a drill boring into my skull. I remembered Jed's words, "Don't say a word to M." I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. The silence in the store, usually just a dull hum, now felt charged, electric. The figure shuffled towards the entrance, the door groaning open. They stepped inside, bringing with them a gust of wind that carried the scent of damp earth, and something else, something acrid, like burnt metal. They laid a crumpled $10 bill on the counter. Still, no face, just shadow beneath the hat. I rang up the sale, my fingers fumbling slightly on the keys. The till drawer sprang open with a loud clang that made me jump. I counted out the change, my heart thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I placed it on the counter, avoiding eye contact, focusing on a crack in the linoleum. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable. Then, a low sound, like air being slowly released from old leather bellows. A dry, rasping sigh came from the figure. It wasn't a word, but it felt like a pronouncement. They picked up the change, their fingers brushing the counter with a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement, and turned to leave. As the door closed behind them, the lights in the store flickered violently for a few seconds, then stabilized. And in the sudden, ringing silence that followed, I heard it, a whisper, so faint I almost missed it, seeming to emanate from the old, disconnected PA speaker above the door. "Good boy." It rasped, the sound like fingernails on slate. Then, nothing but the wind. The next afternoon, when SB came in for her short shift before mine, she found me still shaken. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Elias," she said, her usual cheerfulness slightly subdued as she noticed my pallor. "Just a long night," I lied, forcing a weak smile. She busied herself restocking the chip display, then paused. "My grandpappy used to say some folks round here, they ain't entirely folks anymore. They carry pieces of the dark with..." Best to just let M pass on by, silent-like. She glanced at me, her bright eyes knowing, especially if they got a certain number in mind. Later, as I was preparing for another night, Ranger Mark Cole pulled up in his official Park Service truck, the emblem of a soaring eagle on its door. He was a sturdy man, his face weathered by sun and wind, his eyes sharp and observant. He bought a large black coffee and a pack of jerky. "Heard you're the new night owl at Nomad's Rest," he said, his voice a calm baritone. "Figured I'd say hello. Not much traffic out this way after dark, except for the four-legged kind." He took a sip of coffee. "You look a little peaky, son. Everything all right?" "Just adjusting to the hours," I said, trying to sound casual. He nodded slowly. This mountain air can play tricks on a man if he ain't used to it, especially when the big blows come in. Storms brewing to the west. Could get hairy up here. He gave me a long appraising look before heading out. You take care now. His concern, though brief, felt genuine. But as I watched his taillights disappear down the dark highway, I found myself looking over my shoulder more often. In the back storeroom, while searching for extra coffee filters, my hand brushed against a loose floorboard. Prying it up, I found a small, water-stained Polaroid picture. It was a shot of the gas station, clearly taken years ago, judging by the older model cars at the pumps. And there, at the very edge of the frame, half hidden by the shadow of the awning, was a blurry, indistinct figure, taller than a man, and somehow wrong. I tucked it into my pocket, a cold knot of dread tightening in my chest. The quiet of Nomad's Rest was no longer just quiet. It was waiting. The Polaroid became a morbid sort of talisman. I'd pull it out during the long, silent stretches of the night, my photographer's eye trying to resolve the blurry figure, to find some logical explanation. Was it a trick of the light? A processing flaw? Or was it, as some primal part of me insisted, a glimpse of something that shouldn't exist? My own camera, usually a comfort, now felt like an inadequate tool against whatever lurked in the Appalachian shadows. I started taking photos around the station anyway. Wide shots, close-ups of darkened corners, the tree line. Mostly they showed nothing but the mundane. Mostly, a few nights after the 6.66 incident, the second rule came into play. The bell above the door jingled, announcing a customer. It was a man, older than Jed by the look of him. His clothes little more than rags, his face a mass of wrinkles and dirt, but it was his eyes that caught me. They burned with a feverish, unsettling intensity, like hot coals in the dim light. He moved with a strange, jerky gait, as if his limbs weren't entirely under his own control. He wanted a bottle of water, just one. He fumbled in a greasy pouch at his waist and poured a handful of coins onto the counter. They weren't modern currency. They were dark, almost black, some of silver, others of a dull coppery green. Many were misshapen, clearly hand-struck with crude symbols I didn't recognize. A smell rose from them, damp earth, mold, and a sharp, metallic tang, like old blood. "Keep the change, sonny," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves crunching underfoot. He snatched the water bottle and was gone. The door sighing shut behind him. I stared at the coins. Jed's warning, "Don't touch 'em with your bare hands." I remembered the heavy lead-lined humidor. My skin crawled. From my camera bag, I retrieved a pair of latex gloves, a habit from years of processing my own film in less than sterile darkrooms, and a grim necessity from countless crime scenes. Using the tongs Jed had mentioned, which I found tucked beneath a stack of old invoices, I carefully picked up each coin. They felt unnaturally cold, even through the tongs. The symbols on them seemed to shift and writhe in the dim light. I dropped them, one by one, into the humidor. The clink they made wasn't a normal metallic sound. It was dull, absorbed, as if the lead-lined box was eager to receive them. When SB came in the next day, I casually asked her about old coins, trying to sound like a budding collector. Her brow furrowed. "Old coins? Like real old?" Grandpappy used to say, "Some things get buried for a reason, Elias. Digging 'em up, or trading 'em around. It's like inviting old sorrows back into the light." She shivered, despite the warmth of the store. He told me once about the toll coins. Say, folks used to leave EM at Crossroads, or by old burial mounds, to pay respect, or to keep things from crossing over that shouldn't. She glanced towards the humidor, a flicker of something I couldn't quite name in her eyes. Fear, perhaps, or a dawning understanding. "Jed keeps that old box locked up tight for a reason, I reckon." Her words did little to soothe my growing unease. That night, after locking up the pumps and retreating into the relative safety of the store, I heard it. A faint, rhythmic clinking sound. It was coming from the humidor. I froze, listening. Clink, 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 as if someone or something was inside, idly sifting through the ancient currency. I backed away slowly, my hand reaching for the heavy wrench I now kept under the counter. The clinking stopped as abruptly as it had begun, but the air around the humidor felt colder, and the faint, sweet smell of decay I'd noticed on my first night was stronger now, mingled with the scent of freshly turned earth. I found myself staring at the lock, wondering what horrors it truly contained. That night, I dreamt of Lily Chen. She wasn't in an alley, but standing at a dark crossroads, her hand outstretched, her palm filled with tarnished, ancient coins. Her other red shoe was missing. The Storm Ranger Cole had warned about arrived with a vengeance a week later. It wasn't snow, but a relentless, driving rain that turned the world outside Nomad's Rest into a gray, blurred canvas. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows in their frames and causing the old building to groan like a ship in a heavy sea. The power flickered on and off, each temporary plunge into darkness ratcheting up my anxiety. The rain transformed the gravel driveway and the surrounding earth into a slick, oozing mire. It was during a brief lull in the downpour, when the only sound was the drip, drip, drip from the eaves and the gurgle of water in the overflowing gutters, that the third rule made its terrifying debut. I was staring out the front window, the glass streaked with rain and condensation, trying to pierce the gloom. My gaze fell upon the muddy patch just beyond the concrete apron of the gas pumps, and then I saw it, a single, deep indentation appearing in the wet clay, as if a heavy weight had just been pressed down. Then another, a few feet further, and another, slowly, deliberately, forming a path towards the store's entrance. They were huge, far too large for any human, and disturbingly bare. No boot print, no animal track I recognized, just the splayed, five-toed impression of a colossal, naked foot. My blood ran cold. My blood ran cold. If you see footprints, and there ain't nobody there making them, you get yourself inside. Lock the door. Jed's voice, a low, urgent whisper in my memory. There was no one visible. The rain had momentarily stopped, the air unnaturally still. Yet the prints continued to form, one by one, marching inexorably closer. I stumbled back from the window, my breath catching in my throat. I lunged for the heavy deadbolt on the front door, ramming it home with a loud thud. I fumbled with the latch on the old wooden shutters Jed had insisted I learn to use, their dry wood scraping as I pulled them closed, plunging the store into near-total darkness, save for the emergency exit light's sickly green glow. I pressed my back against the door, heart hammering. Silence. Then, a soft, wet squelch from just outside, followed by another. Closer. A low, guttural sound. Like something large and heavy breathing with difficulty. A sigh that seemed to vibrate through the very wood of the door. A light, experimental scratch raked across the shuttered window. My phone had no signal. Hadn't for hours. The landline, after a few promising sputters, was dead. I was cut off. Mark Cole's earlier radio call felt like a lifetime ago. Or was he, too, hunkered down somewhere, waiting out the storm's fury, desperate for some anchor, some clue? I remembered the loose floorboard in the storeroom. Perhaps the previous occupant, the one who'd left the Polaroid, had hidden more. My flashlight beam danced nervously as I pried it open again. Tucked deeper inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a slim, leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with a spidery, increasingly frantic script. It chronicled nights like these, filled with unexplained sounds, fleeting glimpses of shadows, and a growing terror of the collector, or the keeper of the road. The writer spoke of the rules, but also of a dawning, horrifying realization. Jedediah Thorne wasn't just a man enforcing peculiar safety measures. He was an acolyte, a caretaker, perhaps even a procurer. He feeds it. One entry read, the ink smudged as if by a trembling hand. Not just with fear, but with pieces, memories. Some nights I hear him talking to it out by the old well, making promises. The last few pages were almost illegible. A scrawl of pure panic. Then, a single, chilling sentence on a torn-out page fragment, tucked near the back. It wants a new face at the window. A new echo in the hollows. Jedediah knows how to make the offering. A loud thud against the back door of the store, the one leading to Jed's quarters, made me cry out. The emergency light flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that writhed like living things. Whatever was outside, it was no longer content with just the front. And the words from the journal echoed in my mind, cold and sharp as a shard of ice. Jedediah knows how to make the offering. Was I that offering? The new face it desired? The storm raged outside, but a far more terrifying storm was brewing within the walls of Nomad's Rest. The thudding at the back door stopped as abruptly as it had begun, replaced by an unnerving silence that was somehow more menacing than the storm's previous fury. The emergency light pulsed, a sickly green heartbeat in the oppressive darkness. My own heart hammered in sync. The journal's words, Jedediah knows how to make the offering, were a brand seared into my thoughts. I was trapped. The storm an impenetrable wall around Nomad's Rest, and whatever lurked outside was now, it seemed, being invited in. A scraping sound came from the front of the store, near the main counter. Not the desperate clawing of before, but something more deliberate, a metallic slithering. I held my breath, flashlight beam trembling, inching towards the sound. The lead-lined humidor, the one meant for the ancient coins, was open. The heavy padlock lay on the floor beside it, not broken, but unlocked. And Jedediah Thorne stood there, his back to me, his gaunt frame silhouetted against the faint, ambient light filtering through a crack in the shutters. He was humming, a tuneless, discordant melody that grated on my nerves. Jedediah. My voice was a hoarse whisper. He turned slowly. His face in the flickering green light was a terrifying mask. His eyes, usually just old and weary, now blazed with a fervent, unholy light. A thin, cruel smile stretched his lips. He held something in his hands, a handful of those tarnished ancient coins, and a small, crudely carved wooden idol, vaguely humanoid, that I hadn't seen before. "Elias," he said, his voice no longer the rumbling drawl of an old mountain man, but smooth, almost cultured, and filled with a chilling satisfaction. It has been so long since it had such a vibrant echo to savor. "The Keeper," I stammered, backing away, the heavy wrench I'd kept under the counter now feeling woefully inadequate. "What are you talking about? What is that thing outside?" "Not a thing, Elias," Jedediah corrected, taking a step towards me. "A presence, an intelligence, ancient and hungry. It guards this crossroads, this thin place, and it requires sustenance. My family has understood this for generations. We are its stewards. We ensure the balance. Balance," I choked out, my mind reeling. "By feeding it people, those rules, they weren't to protect me, were they? They were to prime me, to mark me. To mark me," Jedediah chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Clever boy. The numbers, the tokens, they attune the chosen. They open the pathways. Your past, Elias, your grief, your guilt. Oh, it sang to the Keeper like a siren's call. You carry such rich, sorrowful echoes." He gestured with the idol. "And tonight, during this blessed storm, the veil is thinnest. Tonight, it will collect its due. Suddenly, the front door of the store, the one I had deadbolted, flew inward with a deafening crash, ripped from its hinges as if by an invisible giant. Rain and wind blasted into the store, extinguishing the emergency light, plunging us into near-total darkness, save for the erratic flashes of lightning outside, and my wavering flashlight beam. And in the strobing light, I saw it. Filling the doorway and beyond was a towering shadow, vaguely man-shaped but impossibly tall, its edges indistinct, seeming to shift and swirl like smoke and rain. No discernible features, just a deeper blackness within the storm's fury. But I could feel it, an immense crushing pressure, a cold that sank into my bones, and a chorus of whispers, 1,000 voices crying out in an ancient, forgotten tongue, all layered over by one dominant sound. The soft, sibilant voice of Lily. "Jen, did you see me, Mr. Vance? Did you see where I went?" My flashlight clattered to the floor as my hands flew to my ears. The psychic assault was overwhelming. "Behold, Elias!" Jedediah cried, his voice ecstatic above the din. "The keeper of the Crossroads, the Echo Collector, come to claim its offering." He advanced, the idol held high. From somewhere in the chaos, a new sound, a shout, female, sharp with fear and defiance. "Get away from him, you crazy old bastard!" A figure darted from the back storeroom. S.B. Riley. She must have hidden when she heard the commotion. In her hands, she wielded a heavy tire iron, swinging it wildly. One of Jedediah's local customs was apparently leaving the back storeroom door, which led to a rarely used external access point, unlocked on storm nights to let the pressure out. SB must have known. "Spee, get out of here," I yelled, scrambling for my flashlight. Jedediah, momentarily surprised, snarled, "Foolish girl, you cannot interfere with the pact." The shadowy entity in the doorway seemed to recoil slightly at SB's sudden appearance, the whispers faltering for a beat. It was as if her unexpected, untainted presence was a discordant note in its symphony of sorrow. That momentary hesitation was all Mark Cole needed. Another crash, this time from the side window, followed by the ranger's bulk tumbling into the store, shotgun at the ready. He must have seen the lights go out, or heard the initial crash, and fought his way through the storm. "Thorne, what in God's name is going on here?" Mark bellowed, his face grim as he took in the scene. Jedediah, the shadowy horror in the doorway, SB and me cowering. "The offering must be completed," Jedediah shrieked, lunging not at me, but at SB, trying to grab her, to drag her towards the entity. He knew her interference was a problem. I saw my chance. The entity was focused on Jedediah and SB. Mark was trying to get a clear shot, but the thing was too amorphous too. Unreal. My past as a photographer, the countless hours spent observing, analyzing scenes, looking for the crucial detail, suddenly clicked. The idol in Jedediah's hand. The coins. It wants a new face, a new echo. The journal had said. It wasn't just about the person. It was about what they represented, what they carried. "The coins, Jedediah!" I yelled, my voice surprisingly steady. "It wants the echoes in the coins too, doesn't it? The sorrows they've collected." I scrambled towards the open humidor, scooping up handfuls of the cold, ancient currency. The entity paused. The whispers shifted, a new note of curiosity entering the cacophony. Lily Chen's voice became more distinct. "So many stories, so many lost. What are you doing, boy?" Jedediah screamed, distracted from SB for a crucial second, making a different offering. I roared back. I hurled the coins, not at the entity, but towards the gaping, storm-lashed doorway, scattering them out into the mud and rain. "Take these. Take their stories. They're older, stronger than mine." The shadowy figure seemed to lean towards the scattered coins. The pressure in the room lessened slightly. The whispers grew fainter, more distant. as if it was listening to the earth, to the tales the ancient metal held. Jedediah, enraged, turned back towards me, his face contorted. "You'll ruin everything. The pact." He raised the crude idol to strike. Mark's shotgun boomed, the blast deafening in the confined space. Jedediah cried out, stumbling back, clutching his shoulder, the idol flying from his grasp and skittering across the floor. The entity in the doorway, perhaps disturbed by the gunshot, or perhaps sated for the moment by the unexpected tribute of the coins, began to recede. It didn't walk away. It simply dissolved, blending back into the rain and the darkness, the chorus of whispers fading with it, until only the howl of the wind remained. Lily Chen's voice was the last to go, a sighing, almost regretful. Not yet. Silence descended, heavy and ringing. Rain still lashed through the broken doorway. Jedediah lay groaning on the floor, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Zeusby was pale but resolute, still gripping the tire iron. Mark Cole stood over Jedediah, shotgun still trained on him, his face a mask of disbelief and grim understanding. I picked up my flashlight, its beam weak. The air still crackled with an unseen energy, but the crushing presence was gone. For now, we had survived, but I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the core that the keeper of the Crossroads was still out there, in the ancient Appalachian darkness, waiting, and it remembered my face. The storm broke with the dawn, or perhaps it was more accurate to say it grudgingly retreated, leaving behind a world scoured clean and eerily silent. The rising sun, a pale apricot disk, painted the ravaged landscape in hues of gray and fragile gold. Nomad's Rest was a wreck. The front door hung by a single twisted hinge. Shattered glass littered the floor like diamonds, and the wind, now a mournful sigh rather than a raging beast, whistled through the broken windows. Mark Cole had managed to get his radio working shortly after the entity's departure. His initial report was terse, carefully worded. Disturbance at Nomad's Rest. Shots fired. Request immediate backup and medical for one injured male. Hostile. He'd omitted the part about colossal, shadowy entities and ancient pacts. Smart man. Jedediah Thorne, pale from blood loss and a deeper spiritual shock, was slumped against a wall, his earlier fervor replaced by a hollow-eyed despair. The idol he'd carried lay near the overturned counter, looking like nothing more than a piece of oddly shaped driftwood in the morning light. XB, exhausted but wired, was making coffee with trembling hands, the mundane ritual a small act of defiance against the night's horrors. "You two all right?" Mark asked, his voice rough with fatigue, his eyes scanning me, and then speak. There was a new understanding in his gaze, a shared knowledge of things that defied easy explanation. Shaken, I admitted, rubbing my temples where the psychic pressure had been most intense. But alive, thanks to both of you. SB just nodded, her gaze distant. Grandpappy always said these mountains hold more than just trees and rock. When the first sheriff's deputies arrived, followed by paramedics, the official story began to take shape. A violent drifter, perhaps high on something, had broken in during the storm. Jedediah Thorne, in a state of confusion or delusion exacerbated by the weather, had become agitated, leading to an altercation. Mark Cole, checking on the station due to the storm, had been forced to intervene. It was a plausible narrative, one that tidied up the inexplicable edges. Jedediah, when questioned, was mostly incoherent, muttering about broken pacts and the old ways failing. He was taken to a hospital under guard, more for a psychiatric evaluation than his gunshot wound, which was serious but not life-threatening. No one asked too many questions about the ancient coins scattered in the mud outside, nor the sheer impossibility of the front door being ripped from its frame in such a manner. The storm was a convenient scapegoat for much of it. As the deputies cordoned off the station, I found the leather-bound journal. I hesitated, then tucked it into my camera bag. Some stories I was learning weren't meant for official reports. Mark caught my eye, and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. He knew. He wouldn't say anything, but he knew. Later that morning, as a tow truck prepared to haul away my battered sedan, another casualty of the storm, or so the report would say, SB approached me. "You leaving?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I don't think I can stay, SB," I said honestly. "Not after this," she nodded, understanding. "Can't say I blame you. But Elias," she paused, biting her lip. "What we saw, it's real, ain't it? Ain't it? It's not just some crazy local legend. It's real," I confirmed, the weight of that truth settling heavily between us. "And I don't think it's just here. If you ever find out more," she said, looking out towards the brooding mountains, "about these keepers or collectors or whatever they are, you'll let me know." "I will," I promised. A shared burden, a silent vow to remember what the world would try to make us forget. Mark Cole gave me a lift into the nearest town with a bus station. We rode mostly in silence, the unspoken horrors of the night hanging in the air. As I got out, he finally spoke. "Vance," he said, his gaze steady. "I've seen things in those woods working as a ranger, things I can't explain, things I don't talk about. Last night, it put a face to some of it." He paused. "You keep that camera of yours handy. Some truths only get seen through a different kind of lens." It was the closest he'd come to acknowledging the full reality of what we'd witnessed, and it was enough. Months passed. I drifted south, then west, putting as much distance as I could between myself and the Appalachian darkness of Nomad's Rest. The nightmares, thankfully, began to fade, or at least Lily Chen's ghostly visage was no longer a nightly visitor. Jedediah Thorne, I heard through a discreet inquiry from Mark, had been committed to a state psychiatric facility. His ramblings about ancient entities and broken pacts, deemed the product of a fractured mind. Nomad's Rest itself was closed. A for sale by county sign eventually nailed to its boarded-up door. Another forgotten casualty on a lonely mountain road. I tried to return to photography, but the sterile, predictable world of commercial work felt hollow. Instead, I found myself drawn to abandoned places, forgotten asylums, decaying farmhouses, crumbling theaters where the echoes of past lives seemed to cling to the dust motes, dancing in the slivers of light. I wasn't looking for ghosts, not exactly. I was looking for resonance, for the stories embedded in the decay. One rainy afternoon, in a dusty antique shop in a small Oregon town, I found an old bellows-style plate camera, the kind that would have been cutting edge in the early 20th century. It felt strangely familiar in my hands, heavy and solid. I bought it, along with a box of expired glass plates, more as a curiosity than anything else. Back in my cheap motel room, I set up the ancient camera, aiming it out the window at the rain-slicked street. I didn't expect much, but as I developed the first plate, using makeshift chemicals in the dim bathroom, an image began to form. It was the street, yes, but superimposed, faint yet undeniable, was another scene. A dark, wooded crossroads, and the faint outline of a towering, indistinct figure standing where the roads met. My blood ran cold. It was the keeper. I checked the camera, the lens, the plate. There was no logical explanation. Shaken, I developed another plate, this time of the empty room. And there, in the corner, almost invisible, was the faint, smudged outline of a small red shoe. The journal from Nomad's Rest, which I'd read and reread countless times, mentioned that some keepers or collectors could leave traces, echoes that sensitive individuals, or perhaps sensitive equipment, could perceive. Jedediah's family hadn't just been caretakers. They'd been conduits, their lives intertwined with the entity, their own echoes becoming part of its tapestry. And now, it seemed, So had mine. A few weeks later, a package arrived at my latest temporary address. No return address, just a postmark from a small town in Western Virginia, not far from Nomad's Rest. Inside was a small, heavy object wrapped in oiled cloth. It was the crude wooden idol Jedediah had wielded, the one that had skittered across the floor of the gas station. Tucked beneath it was a single, neatly folded piece of paper. On it, in a spidery, familiar hand, were 3 words. "It remembers you?" The handwriting was Jedediah Thorne's. He was out, or he had an accomplice. I didn't throw the idol away. I couldn't. It felt like a dare, a challenge, or perhaps a key. Mark Cole's words came back to me. Some truths only get seen through a different kind of lens. I still travel. I still take photographs, now with both my modern digital camera and the ancient plate one. Sometimes, the old camera shows me things the new one doesn't. A fleeting shadow in an empty doorway. A face in a crowd that isn't quite human. A faint shimmer in the air above an old crossroads. The keeper, or its kin, are out there. They are legion. And they collect echoes. I don't know if I'm hunting them, or if they're subtly guiding me. I don't know if I'm a survivor, a witness, or slowly becoming another kind of offering. All I know is that the darkness that seeps from the ancient earth is real. And sometimes, if you have the right lens, or if you've been marked by its touch, you can see the faces staring back from the shadows. And they, in turn, see you. The whispers are always there, just beneath the surface of the world, waiting for the quiet, waiting for the offering, waiting for the click of a shutter in the Appalachian night. Still here? Then you've made it through the dark. For now. But remember, every rule broken leaves a crack. And through cracks, things creep. If that ending hit you like it hit me the first time I heard this tale, leave a comment. Tell me, what would you have done differently? Like the story, there's more waiting. Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules. Because in the dark corners of the internet, only the prepared survive. And next time you find yourself alone, remember, rules exist for a reason. Sleep tight.